Hello, my name is William, the avid reader, and today I'm reviewing Recarving Rushmore, ranking the presidents on peace, prosperity, and liberty, written by Eland in 2009. And this is the updated version with the first 5 years of Obama's term. So this is the second edition, so this is updated in 2014. So, he has a ranking, it's a libertarian ranking system of all the presidents chronologically. So from Washington all the way through Obama. So it will be interesting how he ranks the last few years of Obama and Trump in the next edition. So we'll see. So the ranking system. So there are 60 points you can the president can get total. 20 points for each category. So first category is peace, so that's foreign policy usually. Prosperity, which is economics. And liberty, which is respecting the Constitution and civil rights. And he gives a libertarian ranking of each of these. So he ranks 41 out of the 43 presidents of the time, since 2 of them died too early to be ranked. So of the 41 presidents ranks, 4 of them are classified as excellent, which is 90 to 100%. 6 are good, which is 80 to 90%. 4 are average, which is 60 to 80%. 10 are poor, which is 40 to 60%. And 17 are bad, which is 0 to 40%. So the majority of presidents are below average. And there's only a minority that's above average. So of the 4 excellent presidents, and these are the ones, that's just what this meant with Recarving Rushmore, which would replace the current ones. With the only one on Mount Rushmore who deserves to be there is George Washington. He's classified as a good president, and the 4 other ones are usually bad or poor or something like that. And the 4 presidents that should be replaced with is John Tyler, which was a Democrat at heart at the time. Democrats and the Democratic Republican Party preceding used to be for small limited government, and there was only the few exceptions of James K. Polk, Andrew Jackson, and Jefferson. Otherwise, they were almost always for limited government until Woodrow Wilson and screwed it up. So John Tyler is number 1 best one. So he vetoed a lot of spending bills because the Whig Party, which is the origin of the Republican Party, which will have always been big government, so pro-business. Pro-business does not mean free market. It's like mercantilism, pro-business. So you support tariffs. It's good for big corporations. It's not good for the individual. So there's a difference between being pro-business and free market. So yes. So the next one is Grover Cleveland. So he was trying to be neutral in foreign policy usually. Vetoed a lot of spending bills of Congress. And interesting thing about the president was supposed before to be only veto on constitutional laws. And Cleveland kind of changed that, but he was a good vetoer usually. He did some bad things like sending troops to stop a strike. Otherwise, he was good and for he instituted an income tax. Otherwise, he was good for limited government. None of these are perfect. They've all done something bad that made America worse, but usually they have so many redeeming qualities that they become excellent, almost. Then is Martin Van Buren, and he's number 3. And he was good in general, except with his policies with Native Americans. Then you've got Rutherford B. Hayes, and he's the only Republican of the excellent ones, and he was good for rates. For example, he pulled out troops of the South-funded Reconstruction. Now, why was Reconstruction bad? You cannot use military force to change a culture, unfortunately, and that we saw again and again and again. And so he pulled out troops, and knowing that black civil rights would take some time to ameliorate, but it was for the better, and he was good at it usually, except for Native Americans. What are the worst presidents? So there are a lot of bad presidents, 17 actually, 17 out of 41, and the 5 worst ones, and they are all connected to a war. So the worst one is Woodrow Wilson. So he joined World War One, and he made it permanent big government. Now government was slightly stabilized and went down to pre-war levels temporarily in the 1920s, but once the 1930s and 1940s came, that was over. So yeah, he laid the groundwork for the many authoritarian policies, the foreign policy entanglement, also a lot of consequences of the world. So for example, if the United States hadn't encouraged the liberal currencies government in Russia to continue World War One, then there would not haven't been a Bolshevik revolution. If the United States hadn't joined World War One, the peace terms either would have been lighter because the victory would have been smaller, it would have been more of regular war for Britain and France, or Germany would have won and they would have issued less strict terms. And he says in this book that the Kaiser was the German Kaiser, restricted speech less than Woodrow Wilson because Woodrow Wilson restricted speech. And yeah, so Hitler is also because of Woodrow Wilson. So Woodrow Wilson, take away Woodrow Wilson out of the equation, elect someone more reasonable who stayed out of World War One completely. Even before he entered the war, he wasn't really neutral. He favored trade with Britain and not with Germany. And one of the lessons in this book, though, which one might seem free market, is selling arms to other countries is usually a bad idea. You cannot be neutral while selling arms, so that we can see now with Trump selling arms to Saudi Arabia in the Yemen war, civil war. Next up, the second worst one is Harry Truman. So he was the one who started the imperial presidency and created the unnecessary Cold War. Now I read this book, I was actually not as libertarian of foreign policy. I thought the Cold War was necessary, and I thought the libertarian hate on Reagan and other presidents were exaggerated. No, the Cold War. So the author makes this interesting argument that if the United States didn't get involved in the Cold War, didn't protect frontiers too much. He advocates the only Western Europe and Japan, there were the only places that the United States should have kept troops temporarily. They should have left other backwaters completely alone for the Soviet Union and China to take over. And I will tell you why soon, but yeah. But because if they let the Soviet Union take over these backwater, there's no better way for it, this word, shitholes, then the Soviet Union will stretch its communism, its socialism, because it's centrally planned, so it's the worse, the more people it involves, the worse it gets. Then it would have collapsed sooner. So it might have been a good thing to stay out of the Cold War. Yes, it could have been bad in the short term for those countries, no democracy, but in the long term it would have been much better, and the world would maybe be more democratic long term, because the solution usually to the world, instead of war, you need free trade. In free trade develops countries and makes the intelligentsia class, the middle class, they want to revolt eventually and get rid of the government there, but the institutions are formed slowly there, so it's not unstable, unlike some other things we see. Then, third worst president is William McKinley. So he started the Spanish-American War. Usually Americans' wars, with the exception of World War II, or the United States declaring war. They started the war each time, in one way or another. So he, in the Spanish-American War, they took some American colonies, or they were on the point of getting, because a lot of what Teddy Roosevelt is credited for being a tough guy and regulating up markets, big business, William McKinley is responsible for, and he was assassinated. So, yeah, and he expanded the Monroe Doctrine to include all of Latin America, and he's the main origin of American aggressive foreign policy. So we've had some aggressive foreign policy now and then, but otherwise it's been pretty neutral before McKinley. And then you've got, at number 4, you got James K. Polk. So he started the Mexican-American War. Now this one makes me kind of skeptical. So all these wars have usually some unconstitutionality to them, one way or another, because the president often declares a war before Congress does it officially. So Mexican-American War. He started the Mexican-American War over Texas. Now I feel like, even though I'm a libertarian, the Mexican-American War may have been half justified, because for the United States to maintain its neutrality, its independence, it needed both coasts, I would argue. So yeah, James K. Polk, I disagree with that ranking. I wouldn't say he was that bad, even though war always entails bigger government, so in that sense that's bad and unconstitutionality. But I wouldn't say he's one of the top 5 worst. Then next up is George W. Bush. So Bush was a bad president. So a lot of Republicans claim to be small government. Another president. So you've got Jefferson, Jackson, I think Hoover maybe too, and Reagan and Bush Jr. Now they claim to be small government often, but they increase the government a hell of a lot. So the Clinton administration wanted to take out Saddam Hussein already, but George W. Bush expanded that, and he had plans to take out Saddam Hussein before 9/11, and then used 9/11 as an opportunity to get rid of Saddam Hussein. And Saddam Hussein, according to a deal that was ready to be made with Egypt, would have left Iraq in exile if he was guaranteed security, and it might have been in Egypt. But Bush refused because he wanted war with Iraq. And yes, so he started the Iraqi war, the Afghanistan war, and the author says Al-Qaeda, it was yes a real threat, and the assassination of Osama bin Laden was a good thing. But it should have gone directly after Osama bin Laden, directly against Al-Qaeda, not against Afghanistan and Iraq, because these societies, which are usually heavily centralized, and there are artificial countries, if you get rid of the head of the snake, it collapses. So yes, and he augmented a lot of government spending, so he cut taxes. But cutting taxes is not a good thing if you keep hiking spending, because that creates debt and deficit, and that in the long term is more expensive, and you only send it for a generation to pay later on. So it's better to have a bit higher taxes and to have the deficit under control, like Bill Clinton did. He's classed as a average president, and then Jimmy Carter is classed as a good president. So yes, and the monetary policies of Bush, the Bush appointee of the Federal Reserve, well, it caused the Great Recession in a large part, and Bush exasperated it because he was a Keynesian. He was a Keynesian, even though he's so-called small government Republican. So the best presidents are not memorable usually, and they're often only one-termers. So of these top 5 presidents, top 4 presidents that I mentioned, all of them are one-termers. One wasn't even elected either. And it says that the corruption charges for the Ulysses S. Grant and Warren G. Harding administration have been overemphasized. Warren G. Harding is classified as a good president. Now he was more of a pro-business than free marketer, but he was still a good president in general in the roaring 1920s. So they had the spoil systems in the 1800s, which meant when the other party president comes in, the people who work in the bureaucracy, they're replaced with party members. Now this is a corrupt system, but corruption is better than overzealous government policies. So it's overrated. You should not consider it too much. And yes, tax cuts which creates more debt and deficits makes presidents horrible in the long term. So the economy might boom temporarily, but that loose monetary policy is bad in the long term. So then such presidents are Reagan and Bush. War is often the root of big government. The ranking is based on the precedents that the presidents set that facilitated more big government for other presidents, and yeah, and their influence. So that's why Abraham Lincoln I used to view him as the second worst, and I still view him as pretty bad, but he's put somewhere in the middle of bad presidents. And he said, and the author says that the war against the South was justified, partially, and that the consequences of Lincoln were not permanent. Yes, and selling arms is bad, and blockade is a declaration of war. So, for example, in World War One and in the Civil War, you have World War One and the Cold War disasters, which were created problems by the United States presidents of Woodrow Wilson and Harry Truman, respectively. So yes, this is an interesting read, especially if you're a right-wing libertarian. I happen to be a right-wing libertarian. So, how would I rank Recarving Rushmore? Well, I would rank it an 8 out of 10. So, I might be a bit biased here because I love the American system of libertarianism and constitutionalism and the tradition. And I view the United States that they had a golden age before Lincoln, I would say, in the 1800s of liberty, because liberty is more now than 150 years ago in the United States. Sad enough. So yes, how would I rank this book? So there are some things I don't really disagree with it, some things he overstates and are not unnecessarily unconstitutional, and he doesn't believe in enough realpolitik for me. So it's a medium-sized book. So how would I rank this? 8 out of 10. So a good book. And it's a great book read if you're a libertarian. And the ranking on, I think he overemphasizes peace probably a bit. I noticed a couple things he missed to list. So he didn't really talk about the drug war that Reagan exasperated, and he didn't really talk about the gun control at all. But otherwise, it's a good book. 8 out of 10. So those he didn't rank enough, taking into account enough drug laws and gun control. But otherwise, he did a pretty hefty ranking. And the only thing that's not really good is that he wrote this second edition in the middle of Obama's term. He should have waited till Obama finished being president so he could evaluate the full term. But yes, otherwise, 8 out of 10. So Recarving Rushmore, ranking the presidents on peace, prosperity, and liberty is 8 out of 10. So Ivan Eland, you did a good job. So this was the avid reader's review of Recarving Rushmore, ranking the presidents on peace, prosperity, and liberty, written by Eland in 2009 and updated in 2014. This was the avid reader's review, and I will see you guys next time.